One. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of Fight Chat Friday. This week we're going to chat through the evolving role of the coach. What are the expectations on you? What does it feel like these days to be a coach? And most importantly, before you jump into it, have a little bit of an idea in your head about what's going to be expected of you before you go there. So if that's interesting to you, if you're thinking of starting your coaching journey, stay with us for this one.
Everybody, welcome back to Fight Chat Friday. So I think this conversation might lead off into like a mini series on coaching, so we'll see how it goes. But basically today's premise is about the whole idea of maybe traditionally the instructor was seen as the Taekwondo teacher, and now we're seeing more of a coaching role develop, and there's definitely some blurred lines there. So I think it might be interesting today to go through that and maybe just have a conversation around this whole topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we kind of kick off with the idea of, initially, are you a teacher? Like, is that what your role is? Or, is it more? Is it something more? And we did kind of gently touch on this before with the idea of the instructor versus the coach and how that terminology is reversed in martial arts compared to in the mainstream coaching world. So out there in the mainstream, a coach is the person who effectively develops a relationship over time with a student or athlete and is involved in their long-term development, the achievement of their goals, and the support of that person on their sporting or martial arts journey. Whereas the instructor is very much a snapshot kind of role where you step in there, you deliver a class, a session, almost like someone in Taekwondo who delivers a seminar. You come in there, you have the content that you want to deliver, you drop it, mic drop, you're gone. There's no follow-up. So
yeah, it's like, I think you can almost compare it to like the gym instructor who teaches the spinning class, and then you have the PT who you're building that relationship, you're trying to get somebody better week on week, whereas the spinning class, they come and you give them a session and they go home. So like that might be a nice comparison, but I think it's important also to almost preface the fact that it's just because you're a coach doesn't mean it's entirely in the sporting context. It's not just competition.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is very much a martial arts terminology kind of thing. So the idea that you only become a coach on the day that you bring a student to a competition and sit in that chair versus you're a coach every moment of every day in relation to those students and athletes. It's just that normally you get called an instructor because it's the normal terminology within the martial arts, and then when we do it in a competition setting it's called coach. Weirdly as well, that is something that differs by country. So it can be trainer in Polish or in Argentina. I know they use that for in the Spanish, and there's a different connotation to that. So a trainer for us is, well, we assume the physical, whereas there's that connotation isn't there, when you go to a different language, a different culture. So I think for us to understand straight away that the role of the coach, using the word coach, is culture specific, language specific, sport specific, and it creates connotations. So really what we're talking about here is the person who accompanies someone on a life journey or on at least a longer term journey inside and outside of a dojang, trying to develop both as a sports person, as a martial artist, as a human being, and that's the all-encompassing role that we're talking about here.
Everybody's seen that meme where it's like a long list of things that you are as a coach. It's like you're the psychologist, you're the nutritionist. It's like you've got multiple roles in one. I think that's maybe one of the reasons why we didn't call this channel TKD Instructor Academy, although it sounds awful anyway. But it's about that whole lifelong journey, and definitely. But there's definitely more to it than just coming in and teaching a class.
Yes, that's step one, just acknowledging that there is more to this role that we fill than turning up Monday and Wednesday 7 to 9, teaching your 2 classes, going home again. Even if all you think about beyond that is the admin, and we'll get to that later, or the advertising and recruiting the students, like, you don't get to ease off. So we have the same idea when it comes to even the idea of the paying for a class. People assume they're paying for 2 hours a week. You're not. Like, that's one of the things, that's another one that turns up in those memes. But the coach can't deliver 1 hour based on 1 hour of work. The coach has to plan that session. They have to have advertised, found those students. They have to do the administration, the back end on it. And they are probably thinking quite a bit more extensively on what needs to happen to make sure that everybody in that class progresses. There's going to be a lot more in it if the person's going to be an effective coach.
But I think that's an important thing to note as well, because it's not a linear process for both the coach and the students, or the athletes, whatever term you prefer, because it's a non-linear kind of progress line as well. As like there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, and that's kind of similar as well. As like it's not very straightforward in terms of you come to a class and you get this much better, and then you come as a coach and you improve your students by this much, and there will be improvement every single week. So it's like it's not exactly a very straight and direct thing. As much as we would like it to be, it would be great that you'd have that feedback every single class, but it's not how it really works.
No, definitely. And talking about that, one of the things that's a challenge, I think, to coaches now compared to many, many years ago is this universally kind of accepted concept of best practice. And that's like, it faces us as coaches as a challenge, the idea that there is a best way to do something, and that best way can be written down, taught to somebody, and that they can then go away and do the best way. And even more so, that you're required to prove that you understand and can apply best practice in order to operate as a coach. So things that jump to my mind are things like, first of all, first aid, health and safety, safeguarding of children and vulnerable adults, data protection, accountancy, and all these kind of things that come into it. There's a need to comply with best practice, and then in terms of when you go and educate yourself as a coach, or you try to do it, to learn about your coaching, you're going to run into all of this, concept of, well, the best way to do this is, or what you're doing isn't effective or isn't the most effective. You should be doing this, which is the most effective way. And I think that's a big challenge that faces coaching now.
Yeah, but it's completely based on experience of one coach, isn't it? It's like, this has worked for me, and maybe I haven't tried a different way, but it's been fine. So let's just roll with this. So that is also part of it. Like there are many routes to get to a similar destination. It's just, it may depend on the route that your previous coach or instructor has taken, and usually people will just follow on with that method.
Yeah, for sure, that's it. And but it also creates a little bit of a barrier to entry, because it's like, there's that fear of experimenting and trying and, exploring and, failing. And, I think what we have to understand is that, yes, there's some kind of statutory and regulatory requirements that you've got to have certain qualifications, or you've got to have, certain courses in place or certifications in place to allow you to do it. It's, it's not a regulated career, but it is one where there is, almost industry expectations or parental expectations, or whatever way you want to look at it. You have to have your insurance, a simple kind of thing. But the learning part of it, I think people are too afraid that, they might be doing it wrong, or they might not be doing it the right way, and so they don't try. And, you lose an awful lot of the value of the failing forward fast kind of idea that, well, if you try things and they don't work, well, you can learn from that and try something new. You can adapt it and try something new. And I think the concept of best practice is something that I think fairly new to like the coaching world, which was so informal previously and is being formalized and professionalized now, that there's I always kind of say, like, the most dangerous thing is somebody who's in the finished their third year of a degree, where everything that got so far is like, yeah, it's definitive. This is definitely the way things are. This is true. This is proven. And in the fourth year, you learn that everything has that shade of grey to it, that there's, most of the time, or, well, based on most observations, or unless it's in this circumstance, or, well, there's actually, a body of evidence to suggest that, it might not be entirely like that. And it's just because that's hard to teach. The concept of it depends, or for most scenarios, most of the time, for most people, yes, that's true, it's not a really solid basis to start teaching people. So I think we run into that very, very quickly, that, people become worried early on that they can't do it because they don't understand it all in its entirety. I think. Yeah.
Shout out to John Mackey as well, friend of the show, who he's a big fan of it depends, because it's so true. Is there's no one size fits all, but that's the whole point. It's like, this journey is something that you have to. It's a practical journey. You have to get involved. You have to start. And I'm sure if you went back to your first year, 2-3 years of coaching, you'd be like, oh my God. But that's the same for everybody, and everybody has to learn with it. They have to develop, they have to adapt. Unfortunately, maybe some of the students you had in your first year, maybe they could have had it a little bit better, but that's just the reality of it.
But you know
So
what? There's a
everybody
flip
has to
side
learn
to
that.
that. There is a flip side to that, because some of the students that I had in my first year are still training in Taekwondo now, and that's
Well,
24 years later. Like, that's a long time, and they've done great. Like, some of them have done
that's a
great. Now there's
flex.
plenty.
That's
There's
very
plenty
good.
of people that, you know, they could have done a lot better with better support, better help, and I got to hold my hand up and say I was still learning. You know, you suffered because of that, but but there's also a thing where the coach just needs to be in a position where they have a way to bring the student forward from where they are. If it wasn't perfect, if it wasn't the most efficient, if it wasn't, you know, the best thing, well, sure, but you know, again, as long as you're still bringing the person forward along their journey, you're still doing a valuable job for that person,
Yeah,
and
helping them.
you know, that's it, you know, and so don't play down that role.
Yeah, and I think, but the big thing about this is learning, and I think that you have to develop, you have to evaluate, which sometimes we take for granted as coaches, especially people who've done it for a long time. They're like, I know how to do this. I've done it for a long time. I know what I'm doing. But still, you can always develop, you can always improve, and I think the whole idea of evaluation is quite important. And sometimes we can be very much stuck in the moment, and it's even like anybody who's sparred. Sometimes you go in and you compete in the ring or even in training, and you forget what happened because you're just so in the moment, you're just in the zone. And it can be similar with coaching as well, and you have to sit back after the session, reflect, and almost just think of, okay, what went right, what didn't go so well, and how can we improve. And that's very simply how you get better.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and I flashed up that one of the lifelong learners, because it applies now to both. I think when I started off as a coach, a misconception that I had was that it could be learned. That, you know, I looked at coaches who had more experience than me and assumed they had, you know, the full package, you know, and that maybe what I was doing wasn't worth as much as what they were doing because they had learned it and I hadn't learned it. And I think the journey has taught that, you know, I'm probably learning more in a week now than I did in a week when I was beginning. Like,
Really?
yeah,
Oh,
definitely. I really do think that's true. Like, I think the pace of learning was slower because you were limited. It's like, in a way, I would compare it to, like, you know, in your first year in primary school, where if you get to the end of the year and you can count to 10 and you have your ABCs, it's a good year, you know? And I think that was the first year in coaching. It was like, you know, I can just about string a couple of, spell a few words out there, and, you know, and I wasn't coming from nowhere. I mean, yes, I had a black belt like everyone else, but, you know, the thing was, I needed to learn how to learn, and I needed to learn a lot of how to learn from other people and through interaction with my athletes. And then that didn't work until I had an athlete at a high enough level to pose the right questions and so on. So the whole thing being evolutionary, now I go to squad sessions every second week and I see athletes with new challenges and presenting new problems that we need to solve. But I've also got a circle of people around who have their own interpretations on how they might go about solving the problem. So I find that I'm in a learning environment more often now than when I was beginning as a coach, where I was in my own little bubble. We had very little interactions with other clubs. It was just me and the athletes in front of me, and their only filter on Taekwondo was me. So I was basically seeing a blurred reflection of myself coming back from the students, which wasn't very challenging, you know, because everything was just, are they doing what I taught them as well as I showed it to them? But once we open up that lens, and it's like, well, now let's put them into competition. Let's put them in front of an independent examiner for a grading. Let's bring them to a seminar, a workshop, or a clinic and see what someone else does. And let's see what questions that brings back from our students and how that challenges me. And a lot of that in the beginning was eating an awful lot of ego. Well, not even ego. I don't think I'd really developed an ego on that front, but it was more like reflecting on the challenge that, okay, yeah, you would learn a lot more by interacting with someone like that, or by, you know, dealing with someone like that. So now it's on me to go and learn from that person or learn from people like that and really stretch it. And I think that's where, if you stop in your journey of lifelong learning as a coach, you very quickly get overtaken by your students who are on a journey, you know, on that lifelong learning journey. They'll reach their ceiling. yeah, they'll reach their ceiling and now they need somebody else because it's not you anymore. So either you continue to learn with them and continue your own process of learning and facilitate, or you know, the other option, I hate to see this, is where, well, the coach kind of truncates the other person's learning. They, you know, they wrap them up in, no, you can't train in other places, we're not going to go to that competition, we're not going to go to this seminar, because of the exposure and what that exposure will do. Yeah, so that it is fear, isn't it?
Yeah, I think like one of the big things about that as well, though, is it all comes back to your reason for being a coach. What are you trying to get out of this? Are you doing this just to earn a few quid? Are you doing it because you have a deep passion for the sport and helping people? It really does depend on the why. And if you draw things back to the why, that will give you a broader perspective of your journey you're going on. And then you'll see people who are lifelong learners because they're passionate. You'll see people who are going different routes. And I think that's a big difference between the whole instructor versus coach debate as well. It's, are you doing it with the long term in mind? And of course, if you're doing it with the long term in mind, you want to get better, you want to improve, you want to find better ways to do it.
Yeah, as you say, like, I mean, if you're only getting a snapshot on a person, that feedback, that mirror isn't there. So there's nothing for you to base your improvement off of. So you can go ahead and learn more on a course and you can apply what part of it you want. But unless you have that longer term journey, we're not getting that feedback of it worked, it didn't work over time, and, you know, the challenge of how to fix it.
And that's why personally I love competitions and the grading format that we have, especially at black belt level, because there's multiple examiners there from around the country, which is very, very useful, because then when you're in your club, all you see is your students. When you bring them outside that, you put them into a bigger picture, then you get to see like a bit of comparison compared to other people. I think that's actually very important, because a rising tide obviously lifts all boats, and that's what you want. It's if the level is coming up from other clubs, other people are going to have to match that, sink or swim. And then that will increase the level of everybody, which is the beauty of having a high level in a particular area. Everybody can develop and improve.
And it's as you said, it's a feedback loop. And one of the challenges sometimes is, if your feedback loop is once every 6 months at a black belt grading, it's not regular enough feedback, and it's too impactful when it hits. Where if you're getting that because, well, you peer review at gradings and you have co-examiners or something, or because you enter tournaments and, you know, you kind of have students comparing one to the other across other clubs, well, you're getting your feedback in more often, and it's less sharp and painful when you get negative feedback. It's also less kind of ego inflating when you get positive feedback. So if you go to a black belt grading and all of your students pass with flying colours, it's like you don't have anything to address for 6 months until you get another bout of feedback and somebody's not so successful. But if you have, you know, something every 6 weeks or whatever, you have something to structure your next series of classes around, because you're getting smaller but relevant feedback all of the time.
Very important.
So another evolution of the coach, I think business was simpler. And, you know, when I started as a coach, as an instructor, being a school owner was really simple. Almost everybody was a sole trader. You pretty much had, either you had a job or you didn't have a job, and that was your main job. But you took the money in, you paid for your hall, you had some money that went into your bank account, and then that went to the accountant and they said, oh, you pay this much tax. But that was all that was really involved in being a business owner at the time. And I think it's really changing now because of the things that we talked about earlier with best practice. But because I also think that we're in a market that's more complex now. There's more competition in the market, and the competition is more sophisticated. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. But in terms of then as the coach, how does that affect your coaching role, or because you're not just a coach, and that's very important, because when you turn up to a session, you may have to deal with other problems that will affect your coaching. So I think one of the biggest things here is actually having that support and having a bit of a network around you, that if you're doing it alone, it's very hard to get far. So it's very important to have that bit of a network around you, have other people that are supporting the long-term journey that you're trying to achieve. And when you have people that are kind of like involved in that bigger picture and the passion of the overall journey of the club, then it's very, very beneficial for you to be able to steer things in the right direction and have people to help. And I think that for me personally, that it's very difficult when, it's almost your baby and you're looking after something for so long,
Yeah.
to give people tasks and roles and give them the responsibility to carry them out. But it's a necessary thing for you to develop and for the club or the school to move forward.
I think what you're talking about there is that like recognizing the fact that you as a coach can't own every skill, every capacity, and every need that the club is going to meet as it grows. So when it's you and you've got 20 kids who are all under 12, all around the same grade, and they're attending the same class twice a week or something very rudimentary like that, you might be able to manage all of it yourself. It might be quite straightforward. But as the club grows in complexity, you have people with different needs and wants. You have, more people training, of course, straight away, and that's a thing. You have the need for assistant coaches. You have the need for administration, for fundraising, for you need a children's officer, you need a COVID officer at the moment. You need, you've got to think of GDPR. You need to have systems and structures in place for these things. Then it's a lot for one person to encompass, particularly if you're, maybe the inverted commas here, part-time. I would contend there's not really such a thing as, there's not many part-time coaches. It definitely takes up a significant part of your life, regardless of how many people you're working with. But the more people you're working with, the more it becomes a second full-time job or your full-time job in its entirety. And it's not a job for one person, really.
Yeah, but if you even strip it back to the basics of this, it's like somebody who's running a business, their objective is to make profit and to make money and get money into the business. So you want to maybe fill your classes out, and maybe you have a massive hall and there's loads of people in there. Then your standard is going to drop a little bit if you're running that on your own, because it's very hard for you to be able to have that standard and to help as many people. We mentioned earlier the role of coach versus the instructor. So you nearly by default become more of an instructor the more people that are there, and like that's a debate that you have to have with yourself as well. There's a nice balance there. Do you want to have many people in the gym, or do you want to have a small little group that you can help everybody and get them to a level? So there is a balance there that you need to consider as well. So that's a big, almost it's a big, for people, it's a big turning point in the decision of, am I going to go more business route, or am I going to go more of the coaching route? And I think that's a big question that has to be answered.
Well, and especially because in the traditional model of things, and in reality, I suppose time is finite. You can only offer so many classes as an individual person. Yeah. And so the more classes that a person can undertake, and the longer those classes are, the less people you can have training. So if everybody trained once a week for 45 minutes, you could fit in a lot of classes. But once people are training 2 and 3 times a week and for an hour and a half, that kind of window of opportunity to deliver sessions kind of evaporates, and the number of people you can be training reduces. So the quality goes up maybe, but the bottom line gets impacted. So I think that's, recognizing and reconciling that, as a coach, is a newer feature. I think that was maybe always true to some degree, but I think it's definitely more true now with the amount of administration that's required for everybody who trains. I think it's an extra layer.
Still goes back to that why. I think it's like why you do this in the first place. So once you solve that question, I think then you can focus everything after that and maybe go down one path more than the other. So I think that's the big takeaway here of what do you want out of coaching, and what's your long-term plan from this?
Absolutely. Now, I mean, we did talk about the idea of lifelong learning, and just to, very bluntly drop in a plug for the free ebook that we've been putting out there, which is just 10 ways to instantly improve your sparring. If you as a coach or as just a general student of Taekwondo are trying to improve your sparring, all we'll take from you is your email address, and we promise not to spam you with anything, but we would like to keep people appraised of our new projects and things that are coming up. You might as well get a free ebook while you're doing that, and stay in touch with us while we're doing. Yeah, exactly. It's win-win for everybody. But yeah, that's kind of what we wanted to talk about on the evolving role of the coach for today. We have definitely a little series coming up that kind of will explore some of these areas in more depth. So if you're interested in coaching, if you are coaching, or if you can see yourself someday helping out about a class, it might be something that would be of interest to you.
Yeah, definitely. And if you've enjoyed this and you got this far, obviously you're interested in this topic. If you're somebody who's been coaching for a long time, get involved in the comments. Maybe there's going to be some people here. We'll have a bit of interaction and have a conversation around this
For
topic of
sure.
the old school coach versus the new school and the challenges and the things that poses.
Excellent. Well, then until next Friday, we'll see you soon.
See you in the next one, guys.